Today, I'd like to talk about different apps and how they can be used in the mental health sector. I will talk about how their ubiquitous features can be used in this field. This is the outline I have for my talk. After a quick introduction, I will talk about theories of change that can be useful for the development of different apps. Today, I'd like to focus on some theoretical aspects and some results from direct experimentation. I will introduce some tools for app development. There's still questions about how we can reach out to individuals with apps. We have some clinical examples also to present to you this morning. Apps have taken over different aspects of our daily life. Apps also now appear as tools that are potentially useful for health and wellness. These apps are software used on mobile devices. And we could also consider them as digital service delivery systems. Apps vary a lot in terms of how they deliver content. There's one main benefit of apps. Through smartphones and mobile devices, apps are available 24/7, and they're available on the go. Apps also have the capacity to connect to different technologies. That's one first feature in the fact that they're ubiquitous that gives them a lot of flexibility. Apps can be connected to telemedicine, can be connected to sensors, to big data, to virtual reality, to gaming, and so forth. One of the first assumptions that we have in mental health is that we do not reach out to everybody who would require care. Since many people own smartphones and mobile devices, we could potentially reach out to many other people. We also know that in mental health, we work at a certain distance with the critical moments for the patients that consult. Patients can experience important moments outside of our appointments. Now with adapted apps, we could potentially facilitate changes. And this could serve to reinforce new learning and also allow intervention at the right time. Apps could be used independently and can be used in conjunction with other treatment aspects. Apps in the health sector have been growing a lot recently. And specifically in the mental health sector, there's a lot of activity in the mental health sector with more than 10,000 apps available. We come to realize that these applications were developed quickly by the private sector and less by the academic and care sectors that have been in this field for a shorter period. We can see app flexibility in different ways. apps have flexibility by in their interaction with the individual that is at hand. Apps have flexibility in terms of the environment, and apps have flexibility in terms of service use. By seizing passive elements around the user or the environment or the service, or in an active way by requiring information or actions. For instance, at the individual level, we can obtain physiological information, we can obtain the environment, the location, the number of people in the area that have digital devices connected. We could also collect information on the lighting or the noise level. Each human to machine interaction can be triggered by the user, triggered by the device, or triggered by a random context that could be predefined based on a target. Knowing how apps are ubiquitous, we can then start to think about their role in mental health. Can wonder on what theory of change can we base our interventions? And some could really guide us in this development. The first theory of change is based on self-determination. Since the individual is in her or his context, this presents an opportunity to learn or to change. For this learning to happen with self-determination theory, we focused on the person's independence. By using the context, we can strengthen skills by providing also support through the application and support from other communities. This could allow us to strengthen change processes. A next theory that's useful in developing apps is Fogg's theory. You can see here the target is to establish contexts in which the individual can successfully activate expected behaviors or desired changes. To trigger these changes, this could be facilitated by two dimensions. First of all, the user's motivation and the ability to change. If the ability level is low, we increase the likelihood that triggers will be successful. The level of motivation will also have an influence. By creating apps, we should pay attention to make sure apps aren't too difficult to use. They should be user-friendly. And apps should also generate motivation to meet the user's needs. A third model would be the comb model on capability, motivation, opportunity, and behavior. To facilitate a behavioral change, we would need to be in a capacity zone, a little bit like in Fogg's model. Motivation has to be present for the change, and an opportunity has to be there. Since apps are ubiquitous, we therefore have high likelihood of being in zones for change. These tools allow us to work on different levels. The first assumption is that we can reach people that we can't reach with traditional services. We can engage them in a process, and we can foster empowerment. Is the first appeal assumption true? I will give you an example. to illustrate this, where some evidence shows what's happening. When we look at the level of cannabis use in different European countries, and in Switzerland specifically, you can see between 1.5% to 4% of the population that use cannabis on a daily basis from the 15 to 34 years old age group. And a strong percentage indicates they would like to change this. If we look at the number of people that consult for an issue with cannabis use, you can see it's a very small percentage compared to the number of people that potentially could consult for cannabis use issues. When we look at an app such as Stop Cannabis and the way users use the app, we have more than 70,000 downloads, approximately 1,500 new users every month. And on another app, Stop Tobacco, there are more than 400,000 downloads. We are able to reach populations that aren't as present in our usual clinical environments when we compare them to the people that consult in Switzerland. So who uses the app? If we look at the user profiles, out of approximately 4,000 people that filled a self-assessment on cannabis severity addiction, we can see that 41% of these are women with an average age of 26. And you can see that the severity of cannabis addiction varies from moderate to high. So this represents people that are concerned about their use and are seeking help. And the fact that we have 41% of women is very interesting, because normally we will see less women in our normal consultations. It seems that with this type of tool, we can attract people that are interested in obtaining help, but are not the typical people that would consult in a clinical setting. So what can we assess with these apps? One of the most common aspects of development is the fact that we can ask users questions at the right time. For instance, to assess their mood. And if it's done at the right moment, we can see that the answers will be more nuanced than when we ask the question with a scale for something that happened in the past 7 to 14 days. By combining different metrics in the study, here in the study, we measured the energy level, the sleep active cycle, and the mood. And you can see in yellow the significant links at some specific times during the day. You can see that the level of energy will influence the level of activity, that the mood will influence the level of activity, but we can see that the activity will influence the following mood, whereas the mood will not influence the following activity. Out of this type of study, we can see how it's important to encourage activeness. And with this data, we can work with users on an individual level to see what factors have the most influence. So the question is, what can we change with apps? There are meta-analyses that have been published. This looked at studies on depression symptoms. By comparing to the control group, there seems to be favorable impact of apps. And a meta-review, a recent meta-review of meta-analysis, we were able to observe that apps are promising, especially in the fields of anxiety and depression. And the impact of apps was higher when apps have user support. In other words, when the user is supported in using the app, the user could be supported by a more or less customized system. Studies on the efficiency of apps have limitations because groups with severe mental issues have not been studied as much, even though there's an interest for this type of tips. The metrics were heterogeneous and interventions were also heterogeneous. What we saw is that there are more than 10,000 apps available in the market for mental health, but very few have been assessed. On the other hand, among the apps that have been assessed, there are not that many that are available in the market. So there's a gap between the scientific world with assessment and the market dynamics. Given the importance of development in this sector, new standards have been developed. These are standards that stem from consensuses. Standards will focus on data safety and privacy, which requires very targeted work with engineers. There's the assessment of tools to pay attention to the user experience and user adherence to apps, and consider to what extent these tools are interoperable with other tools. For instance, in consulting a healthcare professional, or the interoperability with other databases. Another level of standards has been on the fact that are the apps evidence-based in their design or in their assessment? What are the technological interfaces used? What are the different communication methods? And what type of social support is provided? This will be interesting to develop an application and to ask questions for each of these features. Now I'd like to give you some examples. As I said, many apps have been developed. I will focus on a few apps in which we were involved to show you various development models. One model is what I would call a multifocus model. In other words, with this model, we will try to reproduce elements that are provided in therapy, and we'll try to provide many elements at the same time. This was developed in Stop Tobacco, Stop Alcohol, Stop Cannabis that provide
Et
websites
la
and
personne va
apps.
déterminer son choix de
The
changement et va être
individual will select
accompagné par
a change
un
option and will be
psychologue
supported by a coach
cliniciens.
and a social
Le
network.
modèle se base sur la
The
théorie de
model is based
l'autodétermination
on the theory
et
of
les personnes
self-determination,
est accompagnées suite à des
and people
évaluations,
are accompanied, followed with repeated
des outils de prévention de l'abus.
consultations and different relapse prevention
Digital
measures.
d'un
So we are
traitement
trying to digitize a treatment model that we're
où
familiar
la
with.
personne va
With
déterminer
self-determination, the individual will determine his or her objective and will receive
récompenses
rewards
selon ses objectifs.
based on the objectives that have been set out, and the individual can monitor his or her
Qui
progression.
va être utilisé en complément de ce qui est fait
Another
dans la
element that is
thérapie
used
classique, c'est qu'on va
with
pouvoir
classic
identifier
therapy,
au
we
moment
can
de
invite
l'intervention
the individual at the right time
des
to
outils
use
qui sont
support tools
disponibles.
that are available
Par exemple,
through the application.
quand ça
For
va
instance,
pas,
when the individual has a craving,
elle pourra
when things aren't
identifier
going
et
well, or
avoir
when the individual relapsed, and there will be specific messages used.
elle peut être connectée
The individual can also
aux
be connected
consultations ou
to
à
consultation zones or online consultation that what we call, in this case, the safe zones.
en complément, il y a à l'intérieur de ce modèle
Within this
un
model,
modèle de réseau social
there's
qui fonctionne
also a
avec
peer
la
network
modération d'un psychologue. Cette
that is
modération
moderated
est
by a
très
psychologist.
importante dans ces outils.
This moderation is very important with these tools
Avec modération vont avoir
because the tools with a
davantage
moderator will have a higher
de
impact and a better adherence.
et un chatbot qui va
There's also a
permettre
chatbot
de mimer un peu comme une
that will
interaction
mimic
entre un
the
utilisateur
interaction
et
between a therapist
un psychologue.
and
Avec cette
a
modération,
user.
il y a un algorithme préétabli
There's a pre-established
permet des
algorithm
évaluations
that
à des réponses successives.
enables to go from an assessment to different supports for the individual.
Illustration.
I will try to illustrate this. Hello, what would you like to do? I would like, are you a male or female?
Là, comme vous avez vu, on a un modèle
As I illustrated,
qui comprend pas mal
this model includes many components
inspiré des traitements
inspired by
et on a
treatments we are familiar
un
with,
support
and we've
social,
added
une
social
interaction
support
dans le milieu,
and interaction with peers, as well as support tools at the right moment.
d'éléments encore de l'efficacité
We
de
do not have
Stop Cannabis.
data on the efficiency of Stop Cannabis for now.
Une étude qui
This
est actuellement le
is
contenu par rapport à
a
Stop
study
Cannabis.
that's underway
Et là,
on the Stop Tobacco
l'étude par rapport au
or Stop
contenu
Smoking.
qu'on peut faire habituellement, c'est qu'on
Usually,
recruté plus de 5 000 personnes en à peu près
when we
5 ans.
compare to other programs, we can see the number of people that subscribe. We have more than 5,000 people that downloaded the app.
L'application complète et où en fait on
We
va
have
pouvoir
a streamlined version of the
contrôler
app
blend. Donc on
in
va
which
pouvoir
we
faire
can
un doublage
provide a double-blind
et
study.
collecter les données en aveugle et
We will be able to collect the data in a double-blind way
fait dans les deux groupes.
and assess the impacts for both groups.
Avec jeu contrôle, l'idée est
With
d'illustrer
gambling
c'est
control,
une application qui orientait cette
which
fois
is an application
de jeu d'argent.
that focused on the gambling
C'est que
addictions.
pour
But
cette
what's
première
specific
version,
about the
vu les
gambling app,
d'engagement des personnes, le choix a été fait d'être encore plus orienté
we
sur une
decided
cible
that we'd focus on
limitée.
a limited target group
Un ensemble
rather than
de
reproducing
traitements comme
all the treatment ounce as I've shown with the
jeu contrôle.
stop
Le
cannabis.
seul objectif
In gambling control or jeu control, the goal was to support the individual to determine before a gambling session how much time the individual want to spend and how much money the individual want to spend during the gambling session. Based on the self-determination, the individual will predetermine the targets and will be reminded during the gambling session and will be reminded throughout the gambling session if the individual reached or not the objectives and will follow the gains or losses of the session. And the tool will also monitor changes that were brought or not, and will calculate when is it harder or easier for the individual to stay under control. The user can also decide to speak with a therapist on these changes. Another app that was developed in Montreal with our different colleagues and partners, including Tania Lecomte, Stéphane Potvin, Antoine Penou, and also our colleagues from CX Innovation, which is this is an application called Chill Time. What's interesting about Chill Time is that it provides a specific training on emotional regulation by providing to users in the sector different emotional regulation strategies while supporting their use of these trainings with quick assessments before and after their usage, and with a learning system that allows to see what strategies work with the individual and to repeat these strategies while proposing new strategies to expand their range of emotional self-regulation. This model is centered on self-regulation by using different tools and a system. There's also something very interesting in the micro-NIR system. This was developed by colleagues from the Institute of Criminology in Lausanne. This digital tool will use the drug checking, which can be done in a natural setting. There's a device that is similar to a flashlight, which will do instant analysis of a sample. And based on this analysis, will provide specific results on the content of the sample It will determine the purity of the substance and the components of the substance. The information will be collected in a database that brings together all the information and connect this to geolocation. When substances are difficult to analyze and when they cannot be analyzed, other parallel analysis will be done to enrich the device's spectral analysis. This allows the device to learn, and the more the device is used, more it will learn, and the better its performance will be. And you can see the device is connected to several technologies. And this is what the microNER device looks like, which is the size of a small flashlight. And it's connected to the application that provides this information. A system like this allows a better monitoring of the market, and possibly it allows to improve communication strategies with the substance users and provide them more knowledge on what substances they're using. I want to show you with this application to what extent with the different examples of apps, how we can have something generic as an app. We can have an infinite amount of options by combining different technologies and providing different types of social support while analyzing the efficiency with evidence-based analysis. And this shows how app can be a digital service delivery while always keeping in mind what is the end service we want to develop. Another option is to say, how can we make sure that the digital world doesn't evolve on its own? How can we make sure that this reinforces our typical clinical practices? There's a lot of development underway with the InnoWave project in Australia, for instance, where they want to assess people on their general health, their mental health, their social connections, their suicidal thoughts and behaviors. And based on the assessments, the idea would be to go from a model that switches from an application to a digital intervention to an assessment in a clinical environment to an intervention with an associated clinic, and to go from one method to another in an integrated approach using digital and clinical tools. This is still under development, but also deserves attention to see how we can do this efficiently. The digital aspect is highly integrated in the clinical practices through the digitized patient file. The COVID pandemic has really accelerated remote consultation, which was already used in Canada, but even in Canada, this type of intervention has accelerated. And we've discovered within a few days how to use technology for psychiatric consultations. We saw how to provide this type of care, but the integration is still a challenge. One major issue for apps in health in general and mental health is the issue of engagement. When we require individuals to use the app sufficiently, to spend sufficient time for a change, when we ask individuals if they agree to use an application, when we ask them how much time are you ready to spend each day, most of the people will be ready to spend 5 days each day. But for the duration, individuals can be ready to commit for an unspecified or unlimited period of time. I would like to show you some app usage data on the length of sessions. This is with Stop Cannabis. You could see with hundreds of thousands of sessions, most sessions are less than 3 minutes long, with hundreds of thousands of sessions that are between 1 to 3 minutes, and hundreds of thousands of sessions that will last from 3 to 10 minutes, and a small quantity of sessions that last from 10 to 30 minutes. There are little long sessions that last more than 10 minutes, but for all the sessions, most sessions will be very short. And the way apps are designed, we have to determine how can the service be provided quickly within just a few minutes. And the PTSD Coach app, there was a high successful download rate. The application generated more than 200,000 downloads in a short period of time. And when we look at the rate of people that will use the app on day 2, we can see that that rate will drop quickly. The rate drops quickly as of day 2. And this phenomena will be seen in many different digital tools, which is what we call the loss of impact. In a study that focused on 2 digital interventions, Beating the Blues and Mood Gym, the interventions were already validated in their web mode, and RCTs, or randomized controlled tests, when they were used in a general population with journalists, we saw that adding one of these tools does not provide better results than usual treatments provided by general practitioners. These results have raised many questions. We thought we could explain them by 2 factors. First of all, only 16 to 18% of individuals completed all sessions successfully, and the median of users have only completed 1 to 2 sessions. The loss could be due to the drop of engagement from day 2. We also thought that in previous RCTs, individuals were more supported in using these applications. They were supported by people that reinforced their use of these tools, which is often reported as a factor of engagement. To move beyond the engagement issue and to add therapeutic guidance, even though it is small, it will still improve the
c'est moins
success
efficace
when compared to no support.
en effet.
There's
Il y a
can also be a similar impact by peer and social support
un support social au sein des applications.
within the applications.
Ça peut être intéressant quand on étudie
It could be
apps
interesting when we study
qui changent
apps to move away from the health
donc
sector
le succès
and to look at apps that are very successful
comme par exemple
with
l'application
the general public.
Pokémon Go, qui
For
était
instance, the Pokemon Go
le
app,
premier jeu
which is
connu
the
pour la
first
réalité augmentée, qui a
augmented reality game
d'avoir
or the
des,
mainstream augmented reality game.
des là, excusez, là, ces chiffres sont pour le World of Warcraft.
I apologize. These numbers concern the World of Warcraft, and we see the increase of the number of users. And for Pokemon Go, within a short period of time, there were more than 550 million downloads globally.
En fait, que bouger les
And
joueurs
since
qui
this app
Pokémon
encouraged people to be active to hunt Pokemons,
dans
the users had to move around in their environment to find
l'étude a
their
constaté
Pokemons.
les
A
personnes qui
study
l'utilisaient
showed that
avant le jour zéro de téléchargement
people
et après le jour zéro, vous voyez
were
comment
more active
il y a une
after their
augmentation
download. You
du
can see
nombre
there's an increase in the number of
de
steps
Pokémon. Et cette
among users that
augmentation
downloaded
correspond
the
vraiment
app. And the
à tous
increase
ceux qui n'ont
is
pas
even
encore
more
téléchargé
significant for
l'application.
people that not only downloaded the app, but also
Vont beaucoup chercher sur Google des informations sur
seek on
l'utilisation
Google
de Pokémon Go.
information on using the Pokemon
Cet
Go app.
effet est très important
This
dans les premiers 30
effect
jours
is very
et
significant
ensuite
within the first 30 days,
diminuer.
and it tends to drop.
Comme si la problématique d'engagement
As if
versus
the
est-ce que
engagement disengagement issue
important pour les
also
users
exists for this type
a
of
un
app,
succès.
despite the success of an app like Pokemon Go.
En, en conclusion, en fait, les applications
In
sont
conclusion,
des services,
apps
des prestations de services digitalisés.
are ways to provide
L'utilisation
services digitally.
principale
They have
des
strong
addictions.
potential in mental health and addictions.
Elles peuvent être,
Apps
le fait qu'aujourd'hui, en fait, ces technologies peuvent être connectées
apps can be connected to other technologies
en se basant, en fait, sur en ayant défini un objectif spécifique pour une
by
application.
defining an objective for an app and by
Il est possible
using some theories of change. It's possible to develop
très
apps
variées
that
selon les
can have
objectifs
different forms based on
d'atteindre
the
ces
ultimate
objectifs.
objectives.
Ça va être important de
To reach the
travailler
target
avec
audience, it's important
les
to
personnes
work
concernées
with
pour
the
pouvoir
users
répondre à leurs
in
besoins
order to meet their
et voir
needs.
comment dans le futur on pourrait
In the
imaginer le
future,
développement
we can imagine
d'écosystèmes d'applications
developing an ecosystem of complementary apps
complémentaires
for
aussi bien
service delivery.
vulnérables à,
And this
aux
ecosystem
services de santé.
could be integrated to other mental health
Je
services.
remercie toutes les personnes qui ont
I'd like to
participé
thank all the
à
people
ce
that took part in this work
aussi beaucoup d'autres personnes que j'ai pas
and
pu
many other individuals
mentionner
that I haven't mentioned throughout
Je vous
my
remercie
deck.
pour votre attention
Thank you very
et
much for your
j'espère
attention,
au plaisir de vous
and
voir dans
I hope
un congrès
to be able to see you in
aux
person,
États-Unis
perhaps a conference in Switzerland.
en
Come and visit us in
merci
person, either in Europe or in North America. Thank you again for your attention.